You're listening to the Night Stalker Rescue. Episode 6.
Suicide! Suicide!
Came Ian's urgent voice over the command frequency.
Get moving. Someone heard you guys. Khalil is directing everyone to block the coast north of your last reported position.
We hastily stripped the grenades and compatible magazines off the enemy bodies. I left the lone enemy radio where it lay. It had taken either a ricochet or a direct hit in the melee, and the resulting bullet hole marked it inoperable. Then we were on the run again, Worthy threading a path through the jungle as we resumed our order of movement and struggled to follow him in a tight file. The jungle seemed to be screaming now, birds shrieking at us from all directions, louder than ever. But I knew this was in my head, now ringing with the grenade blast, with the physical exertion of hauling ass north, with the hopelessness of our situation. There were a few tactical plays we could make. Booby-trap the dead bodies with grenades so our pursuers would eat a blast as they rolled over their comrades, move up the slope and stage an elevated ambush for the forces racing through the low ground behind us, climb to high ground, and hope the Marine Expeditionary Unit arrived before we were found. But we knew the truth. Each of these options would merely delay the inevitable. Our only salvation lay in reaching the coast. Everything else was a false prophet. We jetted north across the low ground, the plant density moderate but negotiable enough to move at a decent clip. To either side, the slopes rose steeper. We were still in the narrow pass, and Khalil had been smart to put a blocking position here. At this very second, he was undoubtedly redirecting forces northward of wherever this channel of low ground opened up, as well as sending patrols racing up our back trail. If we found a dead end up ahead, we'd be forced to fight our way to high ground while picking off pursuers scrambling up the slope behind us. Angel 1, I transmitted on the move, relaying our current location. We're passing through a ravine now. Need to know what we're facing up ahead. There was a pause, and then he responded.
You'll be out of that low ground in 100 meters or so. Not much high ground after that. You're getting too close to the coast. Khalil routed most of his forces around the hills to the west, so advise you shift direction of movement from due north to northeast as soon as you're able.
Ian, of course, was right. The hills beside us tapered downward as we proceeded, the terrain leveling out to allow movement across a more or less 180-degree swath to our front. As we exited the pass and Worthy shifted our route to the northeast, I could make out the sound of movement and men shouting to one another somewhere to our immediate west. The enemy had rounded the hill, just as Ian said they would, and now Khalil was trying to head us off at the pass before we could make it to the jungle beyond. We were slipping the noose, but just barely, and any relief at this epiphany was snuffed out by Cancer's voice transmitting over my earpiece.
I can hear people moving to our 6 o'clock. They're close.
Well, I replied, they're going to have to get in line, because we've also got bad guys to our west. We hit a small strip of clearing, the jagged break in jungle stuffed with tall grass and extending in a narrow streak in either direction. 20 meters of total exposure in a linear danger area, and no time to bypass. Bust it, I transmitted to Worthy, indicating to charge through as quickly as possible. This was a reflex order as much as anything else. We were 5 Americans with limited ammo and heavy pursuit by overwhelming enemy forces. It wasn't as if we had much choice. The clearing was a sun-rippled expanse, and our team spilled into it with the desperation of foxes fleeing the hunt. We poured on a burst of speed to get back into the trees as quickly as possible. After our flight through the jungle, the blazing sunlight seemed hostile, the short plants aflame with a golden glow that exposed us unforgivably. Low palms, ferns, and long blades of grass whipped across our bodies as we charged across the clearing, waiting for the sound of gunfire to explode behind us. My mouth had turned to sandpaper, the hot island air surging through lungs that burned with sheer exhaustion. I tried to run faster and found that my unsteady legs had no more speed to give. I wildly searched the far tree line, scanning for our enemy's shadows before they saw us. If we didn't take fire now, it was because Khalil hadn't yet had time to maneuver forces into our direct path, and apparently that was the case, because we passed through the sunlit clearing without incident. By the time we finally reached the familiar encapsulating vines and thorns tugging at us as we moved, the jungle felt safe, serene, secure. But like most victories on the island so far, this one was short-lived. At first, everything seemed perfect. We slipped into a protective grove stuffed with tall plants that shielded us with their broad leaves, yet allowed us to pass between the stalks and trunks with relative speed. Since the enemy had no concerns about noise discipline as they shouted to each other, a benefit of outnumbering your quarry by 20 to 1, I supposed, we could hear our pursuers behind us, while they couldn't hear or, for the time being, even see us. But this grove ended in a short rise that Worthy clambered up, stopping mid-step to direct his attention downward. I saw what he was looking at before he sidestepped around it, and I wouldn't have put a boot down there either. Under other circumstances, that curiously formed accumulation of leaf litter between fern leaves would have appeared a poorly hidden booby trap or landmine. Could it be natural? Sure, in theory, but the balance of evidence for such a piling rested heavily in favor of unnatural and thus man-produced, and no point man worth his salt, and Worthy had definitely earned his keep thus far, would dare place a footfall on such a risky and preventable misstep of chance. So he rerouted around the pile instead, taking a few steps uphill to gain visibility over the other side of a small ridge. At that moment, I heard a voice shout in Tausug from the other side. Whoever it was must not have seen us, because Worthy didn't open fire. Instead, he tried to get out of sight, reversing his direction of movement with all the grace of being electrocuted as he backpedaled down the slope. But the jungle floor was loose with a blanket of rotting leaves, and he tumbled awkwardly down the rise in a wild, careening retreat. In his hasty backpedal, Worthy managed to step directly onto the suspiciously abnormal-looking pile of leaf litter, the same one he'd gone out of his way to avoid moments earlier. And then Worthy, to put it mildly, disappeared. I'd never seen anyone vanish in such a flash, short of them being blown up by an IED. This time, however, there was no noise other than a hollow woof that signaled we wouldn't be seeing Worthy anytime soon. Other than that, he was gone. But so too was the suspicious pile of leaves. I darted forward, kneeling to peer beneath the ferns. In place of the leaf pile was a black hole. There, gazing into the black abyss, I realized a momentarily convenient truth. The volcanic rock formations that had shielded Josephine from view in the cliff formation operated below the surface as well. I shined my rifle's tack light down into the jagged, manhole-sized hole, seeing Worthy lying on his back 10 feet below, shielding his eyes against my light. Turning in place, I furiously waved at Josephine, who was now standing, momentarily stunned, a few feet behind me. I could hear voices on the other side of the ridge, growing in volume as they approached, and not even daring to whisper. I urgently pointed toward her, then the hole. To her credit, Josephine didn't hesitate. To the contrary, she actually shoved me aside, forcing me to catch myself with an outstretched hand before my shoulders struck the forest floor. By the time I registered that she'd made it into the hole, her actions were repeated in short order by Riley, then Cancer, as both swept the ferns away and disappeared inside. Within seconds, I was alone on the surface, listening to the enemy fighters approaching to our front. Staggering to a kneeling position, I shuffled closer to the hole, dangled my legs over the edge, and pushed myself over. 10 feet doesn't sound like a lot, but when free-falling into a black void, I will hastily assure you it is. Fortunately, I didn't hurt myself on a dreaded rock pile. Instead, I landed on the obvious, a heap of human bodies. We untangled ourselves quickly, moving out of the human dog pile beneath the jungle's surface. I found my entire team in a subsurface cavern, not much of one, but a cavern nonetheless. The rocky space around us, momentarily illuminated by rifle tack lights before falling dark again, was only big enough to hold 15 men shoulder to shoulder before becoming untenable. Since our collective element was a third as large, it was overly sufficient, at least for now. Amidst my team's grunts and groans, I stood on a spongy dirt surface and whispered, "Everyone okay?" A muffled, grunted series of positive responses followed as everyone stood alongside me. I looked up. The sole light source now came from the oblong hole above us, dim sunlight streaming through the fern leaves that shielded it from outside view. That narrow channel must have become clogged with leaves over the course of months or years, until Worthy's body plunged through like a human chimney brush. It would take an enemy fighter walking on top of this position to find us, but regrettably, that was exactly what was going to occur unless we figured out some better solution in a hurry. I stood beneath the hole, trying to raise Ian over my radio to give him our current location. No response. "All right." I breathed into our huddle as the others closed around me. "Even if we manage to break the enemy perimeter now, Khalil Nuruddin will just maneuver his forces to cut us off. He's been doing a hell of a job so far. Anything I'm missing on that assumption?" No one objected. "So the only way out of here is to take out Khalil." "Sure," Riley said. "And if we could channel lightning strikes with our minds, that might mean something." I swallowed hard. The enemy positions we've cleared so far have both had cheap short-range radios that can't transmit over distance, so they're mainly used to receive transmissions from Khalil. He's the brains of this operation, and he's the only one with a long-range radio. With the prospect of killing or capturing 5 Americans slipping away with each passing minute, he's not going to risk losing signal to his men. Worthy asked, "So?" "So," I began. "Remember that sliver of clearing we ran through a few minutes ago? That's the only clear sky anywhere near us. As long as he can't hear any U.S. aircraft, he's going to set up right in that clearing and maintain the farthest possible communications with his force." Worthy said, "So you're proposing we slither back to that clearing and try to get a shot on Khalil before someone steps on us?" "Not us," I said. "Me. 5 people are tough to hide. 1 has better odds, and if I can take out Khalil, we'll have eliminated all effective pursuit. We can punch a hole in the enemy perimeter and then make a final run for the coast. I mean, our only alternative is waiting down here." "Waiting isn't an option, David," Cancer said from the darkness. "We got 15, maybe 20 minutes at best before some shithead stumbles on this hole and drops a grenade in. Marines won't be here that fast. So let's say you succeed. How are we going to know? We won't be able to hear your suppressed fire, and we can't receive radio transmissions in this hole."
"Give him a grenade,"
Josephine said.
"If we hear a single grenade blast, we know to move. If we hear a bunch of unsuppressed gunfire, we know we're on our own."
No one replied, and she added,
"Is that a dumb idea? Sorry, you guys figure it out. You're the ground fighters, not me."
I said, "That's a terrible idea, Josephine, which pretty much lines up with everything else about this plan. Give me a grenade." Cancer passed me one in the darkness while speaking in a haunted Native American voice. "There's something out there waiting for us, and it ain't no man." Pausing for effect, he concluded matter-of-factly, "We're all gonna die." "God damn it," I snapped. "That's the last time we watch a classic 1987 science fiction action film in the team room. I mean it this time. Though to be fair, pretty appropriate timing." I stripped off my GPS, handing it to Cancer. He accepted it without a word, figuring what I had. The last thing we needed was for me to get rolled up and for them to follow the GPS track back to the one spot on the island that was giving us even a momentary reprieve. Then I said, "I'm out of here. If my grenade goes off, make a break for the coast as quick as you can."
"What about you?"
Josephine sounded troubled. I cleared my throat. "If I survive taking a shot against Khalil, then I'll catch up with you guys. Don't wait for me. Just make it to the beach. Now give me a boost before I lose my nerve. The Night Stalker Rescue is a production of Fathom Curve Media. Written by Jason Kasper, performed by Justin Price and Tara Novi. Sound design by Darren Bowling. Casting and original recording by Audio Sorceress. Produced by Andrew Watts for Fathom Curve Media, an imprint of Severn River Publishing.